Hey fiber friends, Caitlin from Done Spun. Today I'm going to show you how to make your very own festive pumpkin or ghost garland using one of my DIY felting kits. So let's get into it. So whether you got the pumpkin or the ghost kit, you will have received 4 different balls of wool. And so the first thing we need to do is separate these into smaller little chunks so we can make our felted baubles for our garland. Good rule of thumb when you're working with fiber is the more gentle you are with the fiber, the easier it will be to work with. So the first thing we need to do is unravel our ball of wool. And then I like to match up my 2 tail ends and then find the center. And then keeping my hands far apart, I just gently pull and it slides right in half. Then I line up those 2 ends and find the center again. So now we have 1, 2, 3, 4. I'm going to keep my hands far apart and pull my fiber in half again. So now we've got 4 strips. And for a final time, we're going to find the center and pull in half again. And now we have 8 strips. We're gonna do that with each of our 4 balls of wool. So we have 8 strips per ball. Pro tip, if you're having trouble pulling your fiber apart, a couple things could be happening. 1, your hands might be too close together. 2, you might be gripping too tight. Or 3, your roving might have a twist in it already. And if there's a twist, it's already pretty strong. So you want to unravel that twist before pulling it apart. All right, so we've created 8 strips from each ball of wool, which gives us 32 individual strips of wool in total. For our garland, we're only going to need 30, but I always give you a little bit extra just in case a mistake happens or you decide you want to add an extra ball at the beginning and the end of your garland. So let's get to felting. In your kit, you will have received 2 different needles. One of them is a regular embroidery needle with an eye at the top. And the other needle in your kit is your felting needle, which has teensy weensy little barbs on it. I'm not sure if you can see that. But the whole idea behind felting is agitating fiber until everything holds together and creates a solid piece. And so what this little needle does is every time we poke up and down, it is tangling those individual fibers together until they hold on to become our solid piece of our cute little bauble for the garland. So for this actual felting step, we are not going to need our embroidery needle, so we'll set that aside for later. What we will need is our felting needle and our foam for our work surface. Now, when the needle is not in use, it's nice to keep it in the foam. 1, so you don't accidentally hit it with your hand, and 2, so it doesn't get lost. And it just keeps your needle nice and safe. These needles are very brittle and very sharp, so it's important to be very careful when using a felting needle. You always want to go straight up and down. As soon as you start poking at angles, that's when trouble can happen because your needle can begin to bend or break, and that's not a good thing. So always keep your needle straight up and down, and you can just rotate your fiber to keep the shape. So I'm going to show you 2 different ways that you can make your little bauble using your strip of roving. So I've just grabbed one of our 8 strips from our orange color. And the first way you can do this is by doing a tuck and roll. So I just begin to roll the fiber, and as I go, I'm tucking in the edges to keep a round ball shape. The tighter you do this now, the easier it will be to felt later on. So you just keep tucking and rolling. And when you get to the end, you can smooth it up in your hands. And you can see it's not a perfect ball shape, but that'll do. Then we're going to grab our foam work surface and our felting needle. Very carefully, we are going to use the needle to poke up and down to help hold all of those fibers together. In order to keep the ball shape, we're going to keep rotating every few times that we poke at the fiber. Be very careful not to get your fingers too close to the needle, because like I said, these needles are very sharp. Everywhere you poke, that's where the fiber is going to begin to felt and hold on to itself. So it's important to keep your fiber rotating so you don't accidentally make a flat bauble instead of a ball. And we're just going to do this until our bauble feels nice and firm. If you're working with littles, you can grab either a paintbrush or a pencil or even a straw and use the other end to hold your fiber while you are poking the wool with your needle. That keeps tiny fingers away from getting injured. Or if you're just nervous about your own fingers, you can do this trick too. Once you feel like your fiber is nice and firm, you can kind of smooth it out in your hands a little bit. If it's really fuzzy, you can carefully give it a little bit of a haircut with scissors and set it aside and grab the next strip and keep felting. Another way that you can start the ball for your felted bauble is to tie a knot. So carefully, I tie a knot in my roving, and this kind of acts as my base for starting to roll. So I'm not pulling it completely tight, it's still pretty squishy. And then I can tuck this little tail here and then continue to tuck and roll all the way up and smooth it in my hand, just like we did our other one. And then begin felting this one. Once you have all of your little felted baubles done, it's time to get started on your pumpkins and ghosts. Your felt pumpkins and or ghosts are made the same way. You will have your little template that you'll cut out and align on your felt. I've already stacked the 2 layers together. And for the sake of the video, I'll be using a pen to trace my template, but you might want to use a pencil or a water-soluble pen or pencil. That way it doesn't leave marks on your felt. Move your template and repeat until you have 5 pumpkins. Once you've traced your template, make sure you've got your 2 layers of felt stacked on top of each other and begin cutting out your pattern. Now that we have all of our pieces cut, I'm going to start by showing you how I do those cute little decorative stitches on our pumpkin. So I'll decide of our 2 pumpkins for our sandwich, which one will be the front. And then I'll grab my pencil or pen once again. And if this is the bottom of our pumpkin, this is the top. And you can see in my sample here, in order to give our little curved pumpkin its dimples, I've done a modified backstitch. So that's what we're going to sketch out first. So I'm just gonna kind of eyeball it, starting with this bottom part of the pumpkin and then kind of meeting it towards the top with this little moon shape line, a slight crescent. And then same with the other side. And this will be the guide that I'll follow as we do our modified backstitch with our embroidery floss. And you can see it doesn't have to be perfect. It's part of its charm. So I've grabbed a length of embroidery floss about 3 times or 4 times around our pumpkin for the length. And then I'm going to show you a trick that my grandma taught me on how to tie a knot at the end of your thread. You're going to wrap your thread around your index finger and then roll your thumb down and then pull, and you've got yourself a little knot. And I'll do that a couple times since our felt can kind of pull the knot through to make sure we've got a nice sturdy knot that isn't going to go anywhere. And I can trim up that tail if I need to. All right, now we've got our knot at the end of our embroidery floss, and we're going to take our embroidery needle and thread the eye. And then you can leave yourself a good sized tail so it doesn't get in your way. So because we're going to be doing our decorative stitches, but then also doing a running stitch across or all the way around our pumpkin in order to seal it up and add our stuffing to have our three-dimensional pumpkin, I'm going to decide to start my back stitching on this side of the pumpkin. I'm going to work my way down, come across, and then come back up the pumpkin. That way I can continue around with the same thread without having to knot and start again. So I'm going to start at the back side of the fabric and poke till the needle shows up on the front. And I've come just a little ways down from the top. That way our knot can be hidden in the back and we can start our back stitching. So just like the name implies, we're going to be going backwards. So if our yarn is coming up from here, we're going to go back just a little ways through our fabric and pull. That's our first stitch. Now from underneath the fabric, we're going to come back up, leaving a gap between where our needle is and where our last thread was. Oops, there we go. Looks like we've got a runaway tail. And then instead of going right next to where our first stitch is, I'm actually going to split the stitch before going through the felt, and that will make a little tiny V. You see that? And then we're going to continue all the way down. So a little bit further away from our last stitch, pull through, coming in, splitting that thread, back through the felt. Careful not to tangle. And continue on. And stitch size does not have to be perfect here. So once we've done our stitches all the way down one side of the pumpkin and our working thread is coming from the back, what we're going to do, instead of having to stop and start again, we're going to come in from the back. I'm showing you, we're going to cut right across and just go in on our next line over on the back. And again, we're not starting right at the edge because we want to be able to go backwards. Now when I pull this thread through, I'm not going to pull tight. We want it to be nice and loose on the back so we don't get any puckering. And then we can begin doing our back stitch just as before. So I'm going back to the edge of the fabric, following our little guideline that we made, forward, and splitting the thread to go back. Forward, and split the thread to go back. And I'm going to continue all the way up that second line on our pumpkin. Now that we have our cute little decorative stitches on our pumpkin and our yarn is all the way back at the top, coming from the back side of our pumpkin, we're going to grab our other piece of felt and line it up. And now we're just going to do a simple running stitch to hold our two pieces of felt together. So our running stitch is just an up and down. So I'm going to go through that new piece of felt and catch it. And now we can go up and down through both pieces of felt. And you can take this one stitch at a time, like I'm showing here, up and down and up and down, and they definitely don't need to be perfect. Or you can speed things up a little bit if you kind of rock your needle back and forth, making sure to catch both pieces of felt. And you can get a few stitches in at one time. Just always be sure to go back and straighten those stitches out. You don't want anything too tight to pucker your felt. And we're gonna go almost all the way around. I want to stop just before we get to this other side of our decorative stitches. So now we've done our running stitch all the way around our pumpkin, and we've stopped, leaving a gap big enough for us to get a couple fingers inside so we can stuff the pumpkin. Now, whether you got a pumpkin or a ghost kit, you're going to have 5 of your little puffy guys. And so I find it easier to plan ahead and take our stuffing and divide it into your 5 pieces so you make sure that you don't get to your last pumpkin and run out of stuffing. Now we're just gonna grab a little bit at a time and go ahead and poke it on into our little pumpkin pillow that we've just created. So now our little pumpkin is nice and plump and squishy, and we're going to grab that strip of felt that came with your kit, and we're going to cut off a little stem. Again, this is something you can pre-plan out to make sure you get 5 stems so you don't run out of felt before you get to your last pumpkin. You want it to be a little bit taller than you want your actual finished stem to be, because we're going to need to stitch it inside of our little pumpkin pillow. You might want to taper the ends, or maybe give it a little curly cue, whatever you want your pumpkin stem to look like. Then I'm just going to poke it through both of our layers, and I'm kind of lining it up between our 2 decorative lines. And then I'm just going to finish with our running stitch to close up the rest of our pumpkin. And that running stitch is also going to catch our new little felt stem and secure it in place. And to finish off our pumpkin, I'm going to make sure my working thread is coming from the back. I'm going to capture just a couple little threads of felt. And then I'm going to make this loop and pull my needle through the loop 2 times. And then as I pull my working thread, I'm going to guide that loop down so that it creates a snug knot right next to our pumpkin. We'll take our needle, put it right next to the knot we just created, and go in and through, poking out somewhere on the back. And then you can kind of snug at it. Grab your scissors. And I like to kind of push down on the pillow and carefully cut your working thread, and then when you let go, that stitch is hidden inside of your pillow pumpkin. Ta-da! Now just repeat that until you have all 5 pumpkins ready to go. If you are making the ghost kit, the idea is very similar to our pumpkins, minus our fancy little backward stitch. So we are going to just cut out our little ghosties. And again, I've got my 2 layers of felt lined up, so that way when I cut, I've got both the front and the back of our little sandwich ready to go. Once we have our ghosts cut out, we are going to take our embroidery floss, and just like the pumpkins, we want about 3 or 4 times around the length of our ghost. and make our knot at the end of our tail. Thread our needle, and then we will get to sewing. The ghost, I like to start a little bit towards the bottom on the side. That way I can leave a gap to make sure I have enough room to get my stuffing in. I'm going to go in between our two layers to pull my yarn through, or thread, to get that knot to hide in between the two layers of our felt so we don't see it on the back. Now we're just going to do our running stitch. So once again, it's just up and down. You can take it one stitch at a time like this, or you can kind of rock your needle back and forth to catch the two layers of felt before pulling it through and getting a few stitches done at one time. Again, just make sure you flatten everything out so we don't get any puckers. Continue around, making sure you leave a gap so you can get your stuffing into your ghost. All right, so we've got our running stitch going all the way around, leaving a gap for us to get that stuffing into our little ghost pillow. So I'm gonna grab just a little bit at a time and go ahead and stuff it in. Once I have it stuffed, I'm going to continue doing that running stitch to close off my ghost. So we've gotten to the end, and I've got my thread in what I've decided is the back of my ghost. I'm going to capture a few little bits of the felt to create our loop. Put our needle through once and twice. Carefully guide that loop until it creates a snug knot at the base of our ghost. Placing the needle right beside that knot and going inside, coming out on the other end, making sure it's nice and secure. Push down on the pillow, carefully snip your thread, and it's going to disappear, hiding that working thread in the middle of your little ghostie. In your ghost kits, you will also receive a little jar of black and pink paint, plus your little paintbrush. So you can decorate your ghost friend however you'd like. You can have little oval eyes, you can do little V eyes as if he's laughing. I like to use the pink just underneath the eyes to add little cheeks. And then for his little ghost mouth, depending on what expression you want him to have, you can go in with the end of your paintbrush, get a little dot of black paint, and boop, to give him just a little tiny mouth right there. But it's entirely up to you how you would like to decorate your ghost. These are just a couple ideas. So we are in the home stretch. We've got all of our little baubles felted up. We've got our pumpkins and or little ghosties made. Now it's time to grab that white string that was in your kit. Grab your embroidery needle, which I almost lost, and go ahead and thread it. So you have 32 felted baubles. So how I did my garland, let me grab my example here, is I did 5 baubles, then I added the pumpkin, 5 more, and added the pumpkin. And your kit has 4 colors of baubles, so you might end up repeating one of your colors in order to get the 5. Now, because you do have 2 extra baubles, because you only need 30 if you're going to do 5 every other, you could start with 6 and end with 6, or maybe you've got 2 extra and you want to make little earrings, or whatever you want to do with them. Have a felted snowball fight. But we're going to take our needle and our string that we've threaded, we're going to just poke the needle straight through our felted bauble and pull it all the way to the end. Careful not to make a knot. And you want to leave a tail because you might at the end decide to tie a little bit of a loop to be able to hang your garland up later on. I'm trying to find my example here. So you can see I've got the baubles, and then I've just tied a little loop so I can hang it on my wall. So after I've threaded all of my baubles, then I can take either my ghost or my pumpkin, and I'm going to thread him through the back. So I'll start at the top on one side, and I'm going to come out on the other side. I find that if I keep where I go in and out far apart, it makes sure that none of the felted baubles get hidden behind the pumpkin once everything is strung together, but instead they just nestle side by side. And you continue that all the way down your garland until you have your finished piece.
That's all there is to it. I hope you enjoyed this felting tutorial and that it gives you everything that you need to get started on your fibery, festive, felted garland journey. Happy felting, everyone. Bye!